Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel, and today I'm going to be providing you with 8 brand new Shrouded Fable decks with Decklists included. Of course, Shrouded Fable does come out tomorrow on Pokemon TCG Live. Comes out the day earlier, and I thought I would get this video out for you all. So if you're looking to build any new decks from the new set, you want to try out the new cards, hopefully this video helps you out, and you can decide what you want to play for tomorrow when the set does come out. Now, Shrouded Fable is a smaller set. It is a mini set. There's not as many new cards to choose from that actually make up their own archetype. In fact, I had to include some decks in here that get a bit of an upgrade with some of the brand new cards. I'm not including Regidrago or Charizard, which are the two obvious decks that get the biggest boost from this set. And that just kind of feels like cheating, because we all know Regidrago and Charizard are going to be the two best decks when the set does come out. So I'm not including those two decks, even though Regidrago does get to use the new Kyurem and Haxorus the best out of any deck in the new set. I didn't really want to include those decks, but I am still including a few decks that got some small upgrades with some of the brand new cards that actually make a pretty big impact in those decks. So I did want to include that. I'll leave a link down below to Pokecobook, the site I used for today's video. This is where I got all of my list from that I'm going to be using in today's video. Big shout out to Pokecobook. I use it for all of my videos where I look at decks from Japan. I'm going to leave a link in the description to that site. Make sure to check them out down below. And of course, if you're on the second channel, make sure to subscribe down below. We're on the road to 16,000 subs. And if you go on to enjoy the video, leave a like as always. These videos usually do pretty well. So if y'all enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and all that good stuff. And I think without further ado, let's start off with the new deck lists. All right, starting things off, I have a bit more of a unique deck to show you all, and that is going to be the Dusclops Duskull counter comeback deck, whatever you want to call it. It's a really interesting archetype here that abuses Dusclops' ability, which of course knocks itself out, and you can put 5 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. It's one of the best new cards in the new set, obviously making a big impact within Charizard and Dragapult, but playing these cards as their own little archetype outside of playing them with those big flashy EXs actually makes for a really interesting strategy. With this deck, you can force your opponent to take a prize card, meaning that you can fall behind in the prize trade on purpose. Then you can abuse Luxray here, which obviously if you're behind in prizes, you can put the Luxray into play for free. Then you can put Reverse Energy on it, which also works when you're behind in prizes. And then you can hit some pretty high numbers with Luxray and Dusclops' ability to knock out big basic EXs. You can also use Bloodmoon Ursaluna. Since you're forcing your opponent to take prizes, you can get to your Bloodmoon Ursaluna even quicker and attack with it. The one interesting card in the deck that I wanted to highlight was actually Slowbro. Slowbro's got that Twilight Inspiration attack that can be used when your opponent has 1 prize remaining. You can take 2 prizes. So you can actually force your opponent down to 1 prize with Dusclops and then use Slowbro to win the game. So there are some really interesting concepts within this deck, all about abusing things that can make comebacks happen. It also does have the brand new Aspec Stadium card that once you stick it in play, whenever your opponent knocks out a non-Robux Pokemon, they don't take a prize card. There's also Iono and Roxanne, which you do get to abuse a lot more easily in this deck since you are using Pokemon that can force your opponent to take prizes. Sometimes you can even Roxanne your opponent on like your 3rd turn of the game, which is kind of insane. So this deck definitely looks very interesting, and I did want to include a Dusclops and Dusknoir deck within this video. Obviously not Charizard related, but I think there are some interesting combos you can do with these cards outside of Charizard, and I did want to highlight one of the decks in today's video. Of course, I had to include United Wings within this video. This is arguably the deck that gets the biggest boost from Shrouded Fable, and let me tell you, Dartrix puts this deck into another level. Of course, United Wings has always been a bit more of a meme rogue deck. It saw a bit of play during the NEIC 2023 meta, but outside of that, this deck never really got to take off. But now that we have a brand new grass-type United Wings Pokemon, this deck actually gets a lot stronger. Not only do you get to do more damage now that there's 4 new United Wingsers you can play, of course, Dartrix now lets you do 320 damage with Ditto when you get all United Wings in the discard pile, but Dartrix is also a grass-type Pokemon, meaning that you can now hit for weakness against Charizard EX. If Charizard is going to be the BDIF with this new set release, I think there's a lot of merit to playing a deck like United Wings because it does beat Charizard thanks to Dartrix allowing you to hit for weakness. One of the issues this deck always faced was probably Charizard because you didn't really have a good way to one-shot Charizard. The nice thing now about this deck is you have a Lightning attacker with Watchel and a Grass attacker with Dartrix, meaning you can hit for weakness against both Charizard and Pidgeot EX. The deck doesn't really gain any other brand new cards apart from maybe Fesnipity, which I think is a decent inclusion to give you some extra draw support. You're trying to ramp your United Wingsers in the discard pile really quickly. You can do that with Squawkabilly. You can take turn 1 knockouts. It's even easier now when you have so many United Wings Pokemon to actually choose from. And of course, the new Nightly Stretcher also is a pretty decent card in the deck, allowing you to get back any of your basic United Wings Pokemon to keep chaining attacks. The A-Spec of choice is definitely interesting. I think Secret Box is the one that I've seen the most amount of play, but there definitely is some room for maybe Max Bell, Prime Catcher, or even Legacy Energy is another one that I've seen played a little bit within United Wings. But I'm really excited that United Wings is finally coming back thanks to Dartrix, and this deck definitely has a lot more potential now because it can do more damage even quicker and has relevant typing into the BDIF. One of the better new single prize attackers from the new set is the brand new Bloodmoon Ursaluna. It's a basic fighting type Pokemon with a very familiar ability. When you play it from your hand onto your bench, you can put up to 2 basic fighting energy from your hand to your Bloodmoon Ursaluna. Really cool ability, right? We've seen it before on the Galar birds from Evolving Skies, and those saw a fair amount of success. And of course, Bloodmoon Ursaluna is a fighting Pokemon. You have okay typing, and of course, you have a decent attack, which does need 2 fighting and a colorless. You can easily power this up in 1 turn with its ability. You do 100 damage plus 30 more damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. Now, in my opinion, one of the best ways to do that is through Iron Valiant. Iron Valiant's got that ability, of course, when you switch it into the active spot, you can put 20 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. Not only can you donk stuff with Iron Valiant, but you can also use Iron Valiant to pile up damage for Bloodmoon Ursaluna's big attack, making it a pretty hard-hitting attacker with Iron Valiant. With a couple of Iron Valiant pings, your Bloodmoon Ursaluna is knocking out anything. And, of course, being a 1-prizer is really, really nice. It has good synergy with Earthen Vessel, which allows you to get 2 fight energy into your hand. You can also play Lana's Aid, which is a great supporter card to synergize with your Bloodmoon Ursaluna to reuse it with its effect, getting a Pokemon and 2 basic energy back in your hand, easily recycling it over and over alongside getting your energy back in your hand so you can keep attacking with the Bloodmoon Ursaluna. The nice thing about this deck, you can also use the Bloodmoon Ursaluna EX, which also happens to be a pretty good card with Iron Valiant. So I do think this deck definitely looks to be a pretty fun archetype, and it might be one of the better ways to actually play Bloodmoon Ursaluna when it comes out. Definitely keep your eye on this card because it is really strong, and maybe it'll see play within Lost Box too, but I did want to highlight it with Iron Valiant as its own attacking archetype. I definitely had to include the big flashy new archetype from Shrouded Fable. And then, of course, that is the Loyal 3 EX deck. This deck definitely looks to be the big new deck from the new set, using, of course, the new Okidogi EX, Monkidori EX, Pheasantipity EX, and, of course, Pecharunt EX. This deck is going to be the brand new, big, basic attacking deck. Definitely is one that could rival the power of Raging Bolt due to the fact that Okidogi EX hits like a truck and has a good amount of energy acceleration. Okidogi, if it's poisoned, can do 260 damage, which is pretty insane. You can easily power it up with Dark Patch and the brand new supporter card, Janine's Secret Technique, that lets you attach a dark energy to one of your dark Pokemon, but you do get to poison your Pokemon, but of course, that does help Okidogi. The big thing with Okidogi is also using Pecharunt EX, which of course switches into the active spot and then poisons it. Of course, Okidogi does need to be poisoned to do 260 damage, so the fact that you can self-poison it with either Janine or Pecharunt makes it really strong. And then of course, you have the brand new Binding Mochi, which of course you can put onto your Okidogi to do 40 more damage if you're poisoned. So Okidogi, with a lot of the damage modifiers, can hit for some insanely high numbers, even one-shotting big stage 2 EX Pokemon like potentially Charizard and Dragapult, and even Pidgeot EX. So definitely is going to be a very powerful new attacker. And of course, you can use Monkidori EX, which has an ability when if you have the Pecharunt in play, it gets KO'd, your opponent only takes 1 prize card. It can be a bit of an annoying Pokemon to deal with if your opponent can't get around it. You can also hit pretty hard with it, doing 190 damage. The one thing I like about this deck is the idea of a Dark Toolbox deck. While you do get the ability to play Okidogi and Monkidori, and even Pecharunt, which is not a bad attacker. I like the idea of playing Roaring Moon and Darkrai in the deck. Darkrai V-Star lets you reuse your A-Spec card, which can be pretty useful if you want to reuse something like Prime Catcher. This deck does have Secret Box. I think Prime Catcher is also really good. Being able to reuse Prime Catcher with Darkrai seems pretty busted. You can also reuse your Dark Patches to build up your Pokemon even quicker. And of course, Roaring Moon can also be powered up with Dark Patch and even Janine's Secret Technique. It's not as good as Sada, but it does get energy on your Roaring Moon nonetheless. And of course, you can easily power it up with those cards so that your Roaring Moon can also, out of nowhere, take a big knockout with Frenzy Gouging. Even though you're doing an insane amount of damage with Monkidori, it's still not bad to have the ability to use Frenzy Gouging nonetheless. I think this deck definitely is going to be a very strong new archetype and might be the new big basic beat stick deck that everybody plays over something like Miraidon or Raging Bolt. We'll have to see on that one, but I'm definitely excited to try this deck out when it does drop. Next up is a really cool new single price deck that gets to abuse the new A-Spec Stadium Neutralization Center, and that's all thanks to the new Copperajah. Copperajah states when it's in the active spot, with its ability, your opponent cannot play any stadium cards from their hand. I mean, that's not bad. Stopping stadiums is decent. The big thing you're trying to do, though, is you're trying to stop your opponent from getting rid of Neutralization Center from play. And of course, that means with its effect, all non-rule box Pokemon cannot be damaged by Pokemon EXs or V Pokemon. It basically grants all Pokemon the ability of Mimikyu, which is really, really powerful because, of course, that is an annoying ability, especially if your opponent has no way to stop Neutralization Center. This could be good in the later half of the game when once you've kind of ran your opponent more low on their resources with their stadiums, you can eventually stick that Neutralization Center into play, and then all of a sudden, your opponent is going to struggle to remove it from play, even if they use Boss's Order. Definitely more of a late game potential card. That doesn't mean Copperajah is not a good attacker, though. It does require 4 energy, but it does 100 damage or 130 damage. You can choose to do 100 more damage. Now, if you do that, your Copperajah can't attack next turn. It's a bit of a downside, but doing 230 damage is really solid. And of course, the big effect is you can power it up with Metang. So the big thing is you can use Metang's ability to charge up your Copperajah, which is really, really nice. The big effect being that you can do 230 damage and you can power it up with Metang. Copperajah is a stage 1 Pokemon. It's not super hard to get into play. Unfortunately, you can't Buddy Poffin for Cuffin, which kind of sucks. But once you set up your Copperajas, you can easily chain them with Metang. You can use Super Rod to recover your energy. And of course, you do have stuff like Heavy Baton, which allow you to reuse your energy and chain attacks on your Copperajah. So there are some really cool new things you can do with this deck. And I think Copperajah definitely looks to be a strong new single prize deck thanks to Neutralization Center. More of a late game card, like I said, but you can get a lot of value out of sticking that in the late game. And if your opponent has no way to stop it, you can just flat out win the game with a Copperajah Neutralization Center combo, especially since Copperajah is also very beefy, having 200 HP. It's going to be a little hard to KO. Another deck that I think gets a nice big boost with Shrouded Fable, and one that I really wanted to highlight was actually Palafin EX. I think this card does have potential to be a pretty strong archetype. Palafin is a very bulky card. It does really big damage. The problem is actually putting it into play. It's a bit of a special effect, kind of like a Yu-Gi-Oh card. You have to switch the one-price Palafin to the bench to put it into play, meaning you have to play a lot of complex strategies, like using a lot of switching cards or whatever. But this all gets more simplistic with Pecharunt EX, which really opens the door for Palafin EX to be a lot more easier to actually put out into play. Thanks to Pecharunt's ability, you switch in one of your dark Pokemon on your bench into the active spot, and then you poison it. The idea behind Pecharunt is that you basically get to move your Palafin out of the active spot to the bench, and then you put a dark Pokemon, assumingly with a free retreat cost, into the active spot. You do poison the dark Pokemon, not relevant because you're going to be retreating it. Because you switched the Palafin with Pecharunt, you actually then put the Palafin EX into play, and then you just use the dark Pokemon that you moved in the active spot. With a free retreat cost, you switch it to the bench, and then you can attack with Palafin EX out of nowhere, making the process of putting Palafin into play so much more easier. Instead of having to rely on constant switch spam, you can just use Pecharunt and a dark Pokemon. Some of the popular dark Pokemon I've seen is Weavile. There's a Morpeko with a free retreat cost also that I've seen played with this deck. And the one interesting concept I wanted to highlight was actually using Sneasler V, which can use Forest Seal Stones. This gives you a little bit more synergy in a match with cards like Arven. I think that's a cool concept. Palafin does do 250 damage for 1 energy, which is pretty solid numbers, but sometimes you want to do a little bit more damage. Maybe you want to knock out a V-Star Pokemon like Regidrago or Arceus or Lugia, or maybe you want to knock out a Pidgeot EX. So you can use Arven, which already you can use with the Forest Seal Stone Sneasler combo. Sneasler does have a free retreat cost and works with Pecharunt. And of course, Arven does let you get your tools a little bit more easier so you can hit those high numbers. I really like the idea of maybe playing Choice Spell in the deck. Regidrago V-Star is going to be a top deck in this new format, and in order to beat it, you probably want to be able to one-shot it with Palafin. The Weavile is a cool concept too. You switch the Weavile in the active spot, you can actually gust out a basic Pokemon from your opponent's bench into the active spot. Weavile could be kind of good in the deck too. You do have to play Weavile with Rescue Board though, since it doesn't have a free retreat cost. Again, the Morpeko with a free retreat is also not a bad option either, since it's a one-prizer. If you don't want to have too many two-prize liabilities on your bench with Pecharunt and Sneasler, you can always use something like the Morpeko or the Weavile, but I didn't want to highlight this because I think Pecharunt makes Palafin 10 times better and actually makes it a lot more easier to put your Palafin EX into play. Alright, the next big EX Pokemon from this new set is, of course, Kingdra EX, which looks pretty good in combination with Baxcalibur. Kingdra's main attack does 50 plus 50 more damage for each water energy attached to your Kingdra. So, of course, you can just sit there, load up energy with Baxcalibur's super cold ability, put a ton of energy on your Kingdra, and then Kingdra EX takes big one-shots. The nice thing with Kingdra compared to Shempao is you keep the energy on your Kingdra, you don't discard it. The thing with Shempao is, while it is very strong, of course, it is fragile to Boss's Order spam because, of course, you have to discard the energy every time you want to attack with it. With Kingdra, you keep the energy on it, you can just sit there, load up energy, and attack your opponent. If your opponent bosses around the Kingdra Chaos Baxcalibur for whatever reason, well, too bad the energy stays on Kingdra and you can keep attacking your opponent. And that's what makes Kingdra really strong. It is a dual stage 2 deck, but there's actually a cool way to cheat Baxcalibur into play, and that's with Kingdra's first attack, which allows you to put up to 3 water Pokemon from your discard pile into play, which is kind of insane. Using Kingdra's first attack does let you put Baxcaliburs into play for free. You do have to discard them, so you have to find a way to put them in the discard a bit more easily, but there is some cool synergies you can do with Kingdra's first attack and Baxcalibur. In my opinion, one of the better ways to play it is actually with Palkia V-Star. Palkia V-Star does synergize with Kingdra because you can use Star Portal, I guess, to power it up if you want. The big thing is the deck is a bit slower. Kingdra is, of course, a Stage 2 Pokemon. At the end of the day, making it a little bit harder to put into play, especially if you're playing two different Stage 2 Pokemon like the Bax and the Kingdra. You can use Kingdra's first attack to put the Baxcalibur into play, but you kind of give up a turn doing that. With Palkia, you can put on some early pressure with Palkia while you work towards your late-game Kingdra Baxcalibur combo, which is one thing I like about playing Palkia V-Star in the deck. You, of course, can still use Radiant Greninja. You still have Canceling Clone in the deck, so you can still do some combos with Greninja if your opponent doesn't bench a Mana Fee. I think Kingdra definitely works really well with Baxcalibur and Palkia, and I'm definitely really excited to try Kingdra out when it comes out. It's one of my favorite new cards in the new set, and I'm a big Kingdra fan. Can't wait to try Kingdra out when it does release. All right, and the final deck I want to show off is yet another Dusclops deck, and that is going to be a Dusclops with Sableye. This is a very interesting Lost Zone deck that really tries to abuse Sableye's broken Lost Mine attack, which, of course, for 1 Psychic Energy, you get to spread 12 damage counters on the board if you have 10 or more cards in the Lost Zone. And, of course, you can accomplish that with Comfey and Colress and Lost Vacuum. The idea is Dusclops is a very good card with spread cards, and especially with Sableye. Dusclops, of course, knocks himself out, and then putting 5 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon allows you to put even more damage on the board for Sableye to work with. That is effectively 17 damage counters that you get to spread in a single turn with the power of both Dusclops and Sableye. And of course, with Dusclops knocking himself out, if you have a Lost City in play, the Dusclops and Duskull actually go into the Lost Zone, which increases your Lost Zone count by 2. This is really, really good if you try to get a turn to Sableye going with the help of Colress and Comfey. Knock out a bunch of Dusclops, and then, of course, you can easily use the Lost City, and then out of nowhere, you're Sableye on the second turn of the game. Really good against setup-based decks, like any deck using Stage 2 Pokemon. Of course, Charizard and Dragapult come to mind. Just crippling their board completely is going to be really good. I don't even know if they're even going to be playing Jirachi, so, I mean, if they're not playing Jirachi, which I don't think a lot of the Charizard decks are playing Jirachi, this deck can be very, very deadly, because if they don't set up quick enough, you can immediately run them over with Sableye, and they'll never get to set up because you just keep spamming Sableye over and over again. You still want to play the Bloodmoon Ursaluna as a nice big late game attacker, obviously, still really good. You still have Devo in the deck since you're abusing so much spread damage. You might as well play the TM Devo to help spread even more damage. And of course, you can use Cram still. Not a bad early game attacker. Still is decent with Dusclops. It lets you do, 160 damage, which is kind of cool. So it's a really interesting new Lost Zone deck. It doesn't play Mirage Gate or anything. It's not playing any other big flashy attackers like Iron Hands or Thorns or anything like that. It just sticks solely to Sableye as your main attacker, but it definitely abuses Sableye really nicely, and Dusclops is looking really, really deadly with spread cards like Sableye and even Dragapult. We'll have to see where Dusclops goes in the future, but this deck definitely looks to be a very annoying Lost Zone deck, and then if you don't play Jirachi, you're going to get caught off guard. I think Jirachi will be good against this deck, because you put a Jirachi down, you know, you're probably forced to gust it immediately with Cramorant, or you have to Dusclops to it twice. That feels pretty bad. You can obviously put Dusknoir in the deck to do even more spread damage in a single turn, which is even more bananas. That's 250 damage you can spread across the board with Sableye and Dusknoir. So a lot of really crazy combos can come out of this deck, and it looks to be a very deadly deck in this new format. There you have it, folks. Those are 8 brand new deck lists with Shrouded Fable that you can play tomorrow when the new set comes out. I cannot wait to play all the new decks in the new set. I will be streaming again tomorrow. I've taken a bit of a hiatus from streaming, just mainly due to time and just not really feeling the streams, but I will be back live streaming with Shrouded Fable, so definitely make sure to follow my Twitch down below, and of course I'll be streaming on my main YouTube channel. You can also make sure to go sub there if you haven't already, but hopefully this video helped you out, and if you did enjoy the video, leave a like and all that good stuff. What was your favorite deck? Did I miss any deck lists in this video? I don't know, maybe I might have. I was trying to find a Rev Room EX deck, by the way, but I just couldn't find any Rev Room EX decks, but Rev Room EX definitely would be the 9th deck I would have chosen for this video. Again, there's just not enough new cards in the new set, but I still wanted to get out this video regardless. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and of course you're new here to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below. We're on the road to 16,000 subs, and I'll catch you on another video very soon here on the second channel. Bye-bye.